The early morning sun peeked through the clouds as Flight 723 prepared to take off from New York's JFK Airport. It was a routine transatlantic journey bound for London, and the cabin crew bustled about with practiced efficiency. Among them was Sarah, a seasoned flight attendant in her mid-30s who had spent over a decade perfecting her craft. With her warm smile and meticulous attention to detail, she prided herself on ensuring every passenger felt comfortable during their travels. But today something felt different. As Sarah made her way down the narrow aisle, handing out blankets and offering polite greetings, her eyes landed on a young black woman seated near the window in row 14C. The woman appeared to be in her late 20s, dressed casually in jeans and a plain white t-shirt. She held a paperback book open in her lap, but seemed more focused on staring out the window than reading. There was nothing extraordinary about her appearance, no flashy jewelry, no designer handbag, but there was an air of quiet confidence about her that caught Sarah's attention. At first, Sarah tried to dismiss her curiosity. After all, flights were filled with people from all walks of life, each carrying their own stories and secrets. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, she found herself glancing back at the woman more often than she cared to admit. Why wasn't she talking to anyone? Why did she seem so detached from the hum of activity around her? And why, despite her calm demeanor, did Sarah feel uneasy? Her mind began racing with possibilities. Sarah had always considered herself observant, someone who could spot trouble before it escalated. In recent years, airline security protocols had grown stricter, and passengers were encouraged to report anything or anyone they deemed suspicious. Was this woman hiding something? Could she pose a threat to the safety of the flight? Sarah shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. "You're being paranoid," she muttered under her breath. Still, the nagging feeling lingered. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, Sarah resolved to keep a closer eye on the mysterious passenger in 14C. What Sarah didn't know, and what none of the other passengers or crew members suspected, was that the woman in question was far from ordinary. Her name was Agent Maya Johnson, a highly skilled operative with the United States Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. For the past 6 months, Maya had been stationed overseas, on a classified mission involving international espionage and counterterrorism. Now, after successfully completing her assignment, she was returning home to debrief with her superiors. Maya's presence on the flight was purely coincidental. She had chosen this particular route because it aligned with her schedule and offered minimal layovers. To blend in, she had opted for casual attire and carried only a small carry-on bag containing essentials, a passport, a novel, and a notebook, where she occasionally jotted down cryptic notes. These notes weren't sinister plots or coded messages as Sarah might have imagined, but rather observations and reflections related to her work. To the untrained eye, Maya looked like any other traveler, a weary commuter seeking solace in a good book while enduring the monotony of long-haul travel. But beneath her calm exterior lay years of rigorous training, countless missions, and a razor-sharp intellect honed by experience. Maya knew how to remain invisible when necessary, blending seamlessly into crowds without drawing attention to herself. Today, however, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Every time Sarah passed by her seat, Maya noticed the slight hesitation in her step, the way her gaze lingered just a fraction longer than usual. At first, Maya dismissed it as harmless curiosity. People often stared at strangers during flights. It was human nature. But as the hours wore on, and Sarah's behavior became increasingly deliberate, Maya grew wary. Something wasn't right. Despite her suspicions, Maya remained composed. Years of undercover work had taught her the importance of patience and restraint. If Sarah, or anyone else on board, posed a genuine threat, Maya would handle it discreetly and efficiently. Until then, she decided to play along, feigning disinterest while keeping one ear tuned to her surroundings. Meanwhile, Sarah continued wrestling with her instincts. On one hand, she told herself she was probably overreacting. On the other hand, the nagging voice in her head urged her not to ignore her gut feelings. By the time the seatbelt sign switched off and passengers began settling into their routines, Sarah had convinced herself of one thing. The woman in 14C was worth investigating further. Little did either of them realize, their paths were about to intersect in ways neither could have anticipated. What started as a fleeting moment of suspicion would soon spiral into a confrontation that would challenge everything Sarah thought she knew and reveal truths about Maya that no one on board could have imagined. High above the Atlantic Ocean, amidst the hum of engines and the distant chatter of passengers, two worlds were about to collide, one driven by fear and assumption, the other shaped by duty and resilience. For now, though, the flight pressed onward, its destination still hours away. Outside the windows, the endless expanse of blue stretched endlessly, mirroring the uncertainty brewing within the cabin. Neither Sarah nor Maya could foresee the drama that awaited them, or the lessons they would both learn before the wheels touched down in London. As the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, Sarah's unease continued to grow. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the woman in 14C. Every time she glanced at her, the passenger, still engrossed in her book, seemed completely unfazed by the turbulence that occasionally rattled the aircraft. While other passengers gripped their armrests or exchanged nervous glances, the woman remained calm, almost unnervingly so. Sarah found herself fixating on small details. Why wasn't she interacting with anyone? Why did she seem so detached from the environment around her? Even the way she flipped pages of her book felt deliberate, as if every movement had been carefully calculated. To Sarah, it all seemed too perfect, too controlled. Her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe this woman was hiding something dangerous under her seat or inside her bag. Perhaps the notes she occasionally scribbled in her notebook contained coded instructions for some kind of attack. Each thought fueled her paranoia further, making it harder for her to focus on her duties. During meal service, Sarah approached row 14 with a tray of food and drinks. As she handed out meals, she deliberately lingered near 14C. "Would you like anything to drink?" she asked, forcing a polite smile. The woman looked up briefly, her expression neutral. "Just water, please," she replied softly before returning to her book. Even her voice sounded calm, almost robotic, which only deepened Sarah's suspicions. Most people tried to strike up conversations during flights, even if just to comment on the weather or the in-flight movie. But this woman, not a word beyond what was necessary. Her behavior struck Sarah as unnatural, almost rehearsed. When Sarah returned with a bottle of water, she noticed the woman's hands were steady, not trembling like those of nervous flyers often did. This observation gnawed at her. How could someone appear so composed when others were visibly anxious? It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. Was she trained to stay calm under pressure? Could she be involved in something far more sinister than Sarah initially thought? Determined to get answers, Sarah decided to confide in one of her colleagues during a brief break in the galley. She pulled aside Rachel, another flight attendant who had worked alongside her for years. Lowering her voice, Sarah gestured subtly toward row 14. "There's something weird about that woman in 14C, she whispered. "She's acting strange." Rachel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Strange how?" she asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, struggling to articulate her concerns. "She's just sitting there reading her book, not talking to anyone. And have you seen how calm she is? Like nothing phases her. Plus, she keeps writing things in that notebook of hers. What if she's planning something?" Rachel frowned, clearly skeptical. "You think she's a threat?" "Come on, Sarah. People act differently on planes. Some are shy, some are tired, and some just want to be left alone. You're probably overthinking this." But Sarah shook her head stubbornly. "I'm telling you, there's something off about her. I can feel it. Just keep an eye on her, okay? Please." Though hesitant, Rachel reluctantly agreed to help monitor the passenger discreetly. Together, they began exchanging subtle glances whenever the woman moved, even slightly, as if trying to confirm Sarah's suspicions. Yet no matter how closely they observed her, they couldn't find any concrete evidence of wrongdoing. Still, Sarah's conviction grew stronger with each passing hour. Meanwhile, Maya Johnson remained oblivious, or so it appeared. to the scrutiny unfolding around her. In reality, her sharp instincts as a trained CIA operative had already picked up on subtle signs of suspicion. She noticed the prolonged stares, the whispered conversations between crew members, and the slight hesitation in their movements whenever they passed her seat. To most people, these behaviors might have gone unnoticed, but Maya's training had taught her to recognize patterns of surveillance. Still, she stayed composed, knowing better than to draw unnecessary attention. If Sarah and her colleague truly suspected her of being a threat, they would eventually tip their hand. Until then, Maya resolved to remain patient and let them come to her. After all, staying low-key was part of her job description, and she excelled at it. For the next few hours, the tension aboard Flight 723 simmered beneath the surface. Passengers chatted idly, watched movies, or dozed off, unaware of the drama quietly unfolding among the crew. Meanwhile, Sarah became increasingly convinced that she was onto something big. With every glance at 14C, her resolve hardened. She told herself she was doing the right thing, that she was protecting everyone on board. By the time the captain announced they were entering European airspace, Sarah had reached a breaking point. Enough was enough. Convinced she was dealing with a potential threat, she made up her mind to take action. During a quick visit to the galley, she whispered urgently to Rachel. "I need to talk to the captain," she said firmly. "This can't wait." Rachel hesitated, unsure whether to support Sarah's decision. "Are you sure about this? We don't have any proof." "We don't need proof," Sarah shot back. "We need to err on the side of caution. What if we're wrong? Fine, but what if we're right? Do you really want to take that risk?" Reluctantly, Rachel nodded. "Okay, go ahead, but be careful." With newfound determination, Sarah marched toward the cockpit, rehearsing what she would say in her head. She knew the captain wouldn't take her claims lightly, but she also knew he wouldn't ignore them either. Not in today's world, where airline security was taken more seriously than ever. When she reached the cockpit door, she knocked gently and waited for permission to enter. Once inside, she explained her concerns to the captain, pointing out the passenger's seat number and describing her behavior in detail. The captain listened intently, his expression unreadable. He understood the gravity of the situation, but also recognized the lack of hard evidence. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "All right," he said cautiously. "Let's handle this carefully. If you believe there's a legitimate concern, we'll address it, but we need to follow protocol." Sarah nodded eagerly, grateful for his support. Together, they devised a plan. Sarah would conduct a discreet search of the woman's belongings while she was away from her seat using the restroom. It wasn't standard procedure, but given the circumstances, the captain felt justified in bending the rules slightly. Armed with misplaced confidence, Sarah retrieved the woman's carry-on bag from the overhead compartment once she left her seat. Her heart pounded as she unzipped the bag and began rifling through its contents. Inside, she found nothing incriminating. Just a passport, a novel, and a few personal items. Frustrated, she dug deeper, searching for anything that might validate her suspicions. Just then, the woman returned, catching Sarah red-handed. For a moment, the cabin fell silent as all eyes turned toward them. "What are you doing?" the woman asked coolly, her tone measured but firm. Flustered, Sarah stammered, trying desperately to justify her actions. But the woman didn't need explanations. She knew exactly what was happening. And unbeknownst to Sarah, the situation was about to escalate far beyond what either of them anticipated. The confrontation marked a turning point in the journey, setting the stage for revelations that would challenge Sarah's assumptions and expose truths neither of them could have predicted. High above the clouds, amidst the hum of engines and the distant chatter of passengers, two worlds collided. One driven by fear and assumption, the other shaped by duty and resilience. The silence in the cabin was deafening as all eyes turned toward Sarah and the woman in 14C. For a split second, it felt like time stood still. Passengers craned their necks to get a better view of what was happening, while others pretended not to notice, keeping their heads down but listening intently. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah froze, her hands still clutching the carry-on bag she had been rifling through. Her face flushed red and beads of sweat formed on her forehead. She stammered, trying to come up with an explanation that wouldn't make her look guilty. Or worse, unprofessional. I was just checking, she began, her voice trembling. You know, for safety reasons. The woman, Agent Maya Johnson, didn't flinch. Her calm demeanor remained unchanged, though there was a sharpness in her gaze that made Sarah feel even more exposed. Checking? Maya repeated, raising an eyebrow. Her tone was measured, almost icy, yet carried a quiet authority that demanded respect. Do you usually go through passengers' belongings without permission? Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she glanced around nervously, hoping someone might step in to defuse the situation. But the other passengers simply stared, some with confusion, others with disapproval. Even Rachel, the colleague who had reluctantly agreed to help monitor Maya earlier, avoided making eye contact. Realizing she couldn't backpedal any further, Sarah decided to double down on her initial justification. Look, I'm sorry if this seems intrusive, she said, forcing herself to sound firmer. But we have a responsibility to ensure everyone's safety. If something happens on this flight, we'll all regret not taking precautions. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying Sarah with an unreadable expression. Then, without saying another word, she reached into the pocket of her jeans and pulled out a sleek black wallet. With deliberate slowness, she flipped it open to reveal an official badge emblazoned with the insignia of the United States Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Beneath the badge was a photo ID card identifying her as Agent Maya Johnson. Sarah's jaw dropped. Her heart sank as the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The woman she had accused of being suspicious wasn't just innocent. She was a highly trained government operative. The blood drained from Sarah's face, leaving her pale and speechless. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. I'm not here to cause trouble, Maya said sharply, snapping Sarah out of her stupor. But your baseless assumptions could compromise my entire operation and put lives at risk. Her voice was low but commanding, cutting through the awkward silence that had enveloped the cabin. By now, whispers rippled through the rows of passengers. Some leaned forward to get a closer look at the badge, while others exchanged shocked glances. A few muttered comments about racial profiling drifted through the air, though they were careful not to speak too loudly. The atmosphere shifted from curiosity to discomfort as people began to realize the gravity of the situation. Still reeling from the revelation, Sarah tried to apologize, stumbling over her words. I didn't mean, I thought. She trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. Tears welled up in her eyes as shame washed over her. How could she have been so wrong? How could she let her biases cloud her judgment? Maya's expression softened slightly, though her stance remained firm. This isn't just about me, she said, addressing both Sarah and the growing crowd of onlookers. False accusations, based on appearances, aren't just hurtful, they're dangerous. They perpetuate stereotypes and create barriers where none should exist. Her words struck a chord with several passengers, particularly those who had experienced similar forms of discrimination themselves. One older woman seated nearby nodded sympathetically, while a young man sitting across the aisle gave Maya a thumbs up. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps reflecting on their own assumptions or biases. Sensing the escalating tension, Maya instructed Sarah to accompany her to the front of the plane. Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and headed toward the cockpit, leaving Sarah no choice but to follow. As they walked down the aisle, the hum of whispered conversations followed them, underscoring the weight of the moment. When they reached the cockpit, Maya knocked firmly on the door and waited for permission to enter. Once inside, she wasted no time explaining the situation to the captain. Your flight attendant searched my belongings without cause, she stated bluntly, showing him her badge. This isn't just a breach of protocol, it's unacceptable. The captain swallowed hard, clearly taken aback by the turn of events. He glanced at Sarah, who stood beside him looking utterly defeated. "Ma'am, I assure you this is not standard procedure," he said quickly, addressing Maya. "We take security very seriously, but we also respect our passengers' rights." Maya crossed her arms, her expression unwavering. "Good. Then I expect immediate action to address this issue. I'll need to file a formal complaint upon landing, and I trust your airline will handle it appropriately." The captain nodded, vigorously. "Of course, we'll cooperate fully. Please accept my sincerest apologies for what happened." Satisfied, for now, Maya stepped back, allowing the captain to deal with Sarah privately. As the two discussed the next steps, Maya returned to her seat, ignoring the curious stares of fellow passengers. She knew the incident wasn't over, far from it, but for now she chose to focus on maintaining her composure and ensuring the rest of the flight proceeded smoothly. Back in the cockpit, Sarah broke down in tears, overwhelmed by guilt and fear. The captain listened patiently as she recounted her actions, though his expression grew increasingly stern. When she finished, he sighed deeply. "Sarah, I understand you were trying to do your job," he said, "but profiling passengers based on assumptions is never acceptable. You've put us in a difficult position." He informed her that disciplinary measures would be taken once they landed, including a suspension pending an internal investigation. The news hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. Her career, which she had worked so hard to build, now hung precariously in the balance, all because of one reckless decision fueled by bias. As the plane continued its journey toward London, the mood on board remained tense. Passengers resumed their activities, but the earlier confrontation lingered in the air, a reminder of the complexities of human interaction and the consequences of unchecked prejudice. For Sarah, the hours until landing felt endless, each minute dragging by as she grappled with the magnitude of her mistake. For Maya, however, the ordeal reinforced her resolve. False accusations weren't new to her. They came with the territory of being a black woman in a predominantly white, male-dominated field. But every instance reminded her of the systemic issues that needed addressing. As the plane descended toward Heathrow Airport, she vowed to use this experience as an opportunity to advocate for change, not just within the airline industry, but across society as a whole. High above the clouds, amidst the hum of engines and the distant chatter of passengers, two worlds collided, one driven by fear and assumption, the other shaped by duty and resilience. And as the wheels touched down on the runway, the ripple effects of their encounter would soon spread far beyond the confines of Flight 723. As the plane taxied to its designated gate at Heathrow Airport, the tension aboard Flight 723 remained palpable. Passengers gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark, but the earlier confrontation between Sarah and Maya lingered in the air like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. While most travelers were eager to leave the drama behind, whispers about the incident continued to ripple through the cabin. Some openly criticized Sarah's actions, while others expressed sympathy for her predicament. But one thing was clear: no one would forget what had happened anytime soon. For Sarah, the walk down the aisle felt like a gauntlet. Every step toward the exit brought fresh waves of shame and embarrassment. She avoided making eye contact with anyone, keeping her head bowed as if trying to disappear. Her hands trembled as she clutched her flight bag, and tears threatened to spill over despite her best efforts to hold them back. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She couldn't shake the image of Maya's badge or the steely resolve in her voice when she confronted her. It was a lesson she wouldn't soon forget, but one she wished she hadn't learned this way. Meanwhile, Maya moved through the cabin with quiet confidence. Unlike Sarah, she didn't try to avoid attention. Instead, she embraced it, knowing full well that moments like these could spark important conversations. As she passed rows of passengers, some nodded respectfully, acknowledging her composure under pressure. Others avoided looking at her altogether, perhaps out of guilt or discomfort. Either way, Maya understood the power of visibility, and she intended to use it wisely. Once off the plane, Maya wasted no time filing a formal complaint with airport authorities. Security personnel quickly escorted Sarah and the captain to a private room for questioning. Behind closed doors, the atmosphere grew even more intense. Sarah sat slumped in a chair, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. Across the table, Maya maintained her calm demeanor, though her sharp gaze never wavered. "I'm not here to punish you personally," Maya said firmly, addressing both Sarah and the captain. "But incidents like this reflect larger systemic issues within your industry. People like me shouldn't have to endure suspicion simply because of how we look." Her words struck a nerve, particularly with Sarah, who broke down again. Between sobs, she admitted her role in the wrongful accusation, explaining how her instincts had spiraled into paranoia. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she choked out. "I swear I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I just wanted to keep everyone safe." Maya listened without interrupting, her expression softening slightly. She knew Sarah's intentions weren't malicious, but good intentions didn't absolve harmful actions. "Your fear doesn't excuse your behavior," Maya replied. "When you act on assumptions based on someone's appearance, you perpetuate stereotypes that harm entire communities. That's why accountability matters." The captain nodded solemnly, clearly aware of the gravity of the situation. He assured Maya that disciplinary action would follow, promising to implement stricter guidelines regarding passenger privacy and interactions. "We'll also conduct mandatory diversity training for all staff members," he added. "This can't happen again." Satisfied, for now, Maya agreed to cooperate with the investigation. However, she made it clear that justice wasn't just about retribution. "This is an opportunity for growth," she said. "Use this moment to educate your team and create real change. That's the only way to prevent something like this from happening again." As the meeting drew to a close, security personnel escorted Sarah away, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. Though the confrontation had been exhausting, she felt a sense of purpose wash over her. Encounters like these reminded her why she chose this line of work, not just to protect her country, but to challenge biases and advocate for equality wherever she went. Back in the terminal, news of the incident began spreading rapidly. Passengers who witnessed the drama on board took to social media, sharing their accounts of what happened. Within hours, hashtags like "Your Bias on Board" and "Justice for Maya" trended online, drawing attention to the issue of racial profiling in the airline industry. Journalists picked up the story, interviewing passengers and experts alike. Public outrage erupted, with many condemning Sarah's actions and praising Maya for standing up against injustice. For Sarah, the fallout was devastating. Stripped of her position and grappling with guilt, she retreated from public life, seeking solace in solitude. Friends and family rallied around her, urging her to learn from the experience and make amends. Slowly but surely, she began attending sensitivity workshops and volunteering with organizations promoting racial equality. Though redemption wouldn't come easily, she vowed to become part of the solution rather than perpetuating the problem. As for Maya, the ordeal reinforced her commitment to fighting bias wherever she encountered it. Whether undercover or not, she continued serving her country with unwavering dedication, knowing full well the challenges she might face along the way. Yet each challenge only strengthened her resolve to make the world a fairer place, one step at a time. By evening, the story had gone viral, sparking debates about racial profiling and workplace discrimination across multiple platforms. Many praised Maya for handling the situation with grace and professionalism, hailing her as a symbol of resilience and empowerment. Others used the incident as a springboard to discuss broader societal issues, calling for systemic reforms in industries plagued by prejudice. Amidst the chaos, Maya received a message from her superior. "Well done. You handled that perfectly." Smiling faintly, she boarded a car waiting to take her to her next assignment. Her work was far from over, but for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. High above the clouds or deep within the trenches of society, Maya knew her mission was clear: to fight for justice, equality, and understanding, even when it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. And so, what began as a tense confrontation aboard a transatlantic flight ended as a powerful catalyst for change. For Sarah, it was a humbling reminder of the consequences of unchecked bias. For Maya, It was another chapter in her ongoing battle against prejudice, and for everyone else touched by the incident, it served as a poignant lesson in humanity, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and true strength lies in empathy, understanding, and the courage to confront our own flaws. The days following the incident on Flight 723 were nothing short of chaotic for everyone involved. News outlets couldn't get enough of the story, and social media exploded with reactions ranging from outrage to admiration. For Sarah, the flight attendant at the center of the controversy, life became a whirlwind of scrutiny and self-reflection. Her name was splashed across headlines, often accompanied by phrases like racial profiling and unprofessional conduct. The public shaming was relentless, and every comment section seemed to echo her worst fears. She had made a grave mistake, one that would haunt her for years to come. At first, Sarah tried to avoid the storm altogether. She turned off her phone, unplugged from social media, and spent hours locked in her apartment, replaying the events of that fateful flight in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about Maya, the steely look in her eyes when she revealed her CIA badge, the calm yet firm tone of her voice as she called out Sarah's actions. It wasn't just embarrassment gnawing at Sarah, it was guilt. Profound, suffocating guilt. How could she have let her biases cloud her judgment so completely? What if her assumptions had escalated into something far worse? But hiding wasn't an option. Not for long. The airline launched an internal investigation, calling Sarah in for multiple interviews to explain her side of the story. Each session felt like stepping into a courtroom, with executives firing questions at her while she struggled to defend herself. Did she truly believe the passenger posed a threat? Why hadn't she followed proper protocol before searching someone's belongings? And most importantly, how did racial bias factor into her decision-making process? Sarah answered honestly, admitting her mistakes without hesitation. "I thought I was doing my job," she said during one particularly grueling meeting. "I wanted to keep everyone safe, but I see now how wrong I was. My assumptions weren't based on facts, they were based on fear. Fear of what I didn't understand." Her candor earned her some sympathy from the investigators, but it didn't spare her from consequences. After weeks of deliberation, the airline announced its decision. Sarah would be suspended indefinitely pending further review. Additionally, she was required to undergo mandatory diversity training and complete community service hours focused on combating racial discrimination. While these measures offered a path toward redemption, they also served as a constant reminder of her failure, a scar she knew would take time to heal. Meanwhile, Maya Johnson continued her work as a CIA operative, though the incident stayed fresh in her mind. She understood that moments like these, moments where prejudice collided with accountability, were opportunities for change. In the days after landing, Maya spoke to journalists and advocacy groups, sharing her perspective on the dangers of racial profiling and the importance of systemic reform. Her calm demeanor and articulate responses won widespread admiration, turning her into an unexpected symbol of resilience and strength. "I'm not here to vilify anyone," Maya said during one interview. "This isn't about punishing individuals. It's about addressing the root causes of bias. When we allow stereotypes to dictate our actions, we harm not only those targeted, but also ourselves. We lose trust, empathy, and the ability to see each other as equals." Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations far beyond the confines of the airline industry. Schools, businesses, and government agencies began reaching out, asking her to speak at workshops and panel discussions. Though Maya's schedule was already packed with classified missions, she made time to participate whenever possible. To her, education was a weapon, one that could dismantle ignorance and foster understanding. Back at the airline, executives scrambled to repair their damaged reputation. They issued public apologies, vowing to implement sweeping changes to prevent similar incidents in the future. Mandatory diversity training became standard for all employees, and new protocols were introduced to ensure passengers' rights were respected at all times. The company even partnered with civil rights organizations to develop educational programs aimed at eliminating bias in the workplace. For Sarah, watching these efforts unfold brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt relieved that her mistake had prompted meaningful action. On the other hand, she couldn't escape the feeling that she had become a cautionary tale, a living example of what happens when fear overrides reason. Determined to make amends, she threw herself into the diversity training sessions, soaking up every lesson and challenging her own preconceived notions. One day, during a workshop led by a former police officer turned anti-racism advocate, Sarah found herself breaking down in tears. The speaker recounted his own experiences with racial profiling, describing the pain and frustration of being judged solely by the color of his skin. "It's not just about the individual who discriminates," he said. "It's about the message. It sends that you don't belong, that you're less than human." Sarah listened intently, her heart aching with regret. She realized then that her actions on Flight 723 hadn't just hurt Maya. They had reinforced a system of inequality that affected countless others. The weight of that realization hit her hard, but it also ignited a spark within her. If she could learn from this experience and use it to help others, maybe, just maybe, she could turn her shame into something positive. As weeks turned into months, Sarah slowly began rebuilding her life. She volunteered at a local nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting racial equality, organizing events and facilitating discussions about bias and inclusion. At first, she kept a low profile, hesitant to share her story. But eventually, she mustered the courage to speak openly about her role in the Flight 723 incident, hoping her honesty might inspire others to confront their own biases. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. Colleagues who had once dismissed her as reckless or unprofessional began seeing her in a new light. Even Maya heard about Sarah's efforts and acknowledged her progress, though the two never crossed paths again. In a way, their stories remained intertwined, two sides of the same coin, representing both the harm caused by prejudice and the potential for growth and redemption. The end of the year, the airline industry had undergone significant changes, thanks in part to Maya's advocacy. New policies were introduced, training programs expanded, and awareness campaigns launched to educate employees and passengers alike. While no system is perfect, the strides made gave hope to those fighting for equality in all areas of life. For Maya, the journey reinforced her belief in the power of resilience and accountability. False accusations and racial profiling were challenges she faced regularly, but each encounter strengthened her resolve to create a better world. As she boarded another flight, this time bound for a covert mission in Eastern Europe, she reflected on the ripple effects of her confrontation with Sarah. It was a reminder that even small acts of courage could lead to big changes, and for Sarah, the road ahead was still long, but she walked it with purpose. Every step forward was a testament to her determination to grow, to learn, and to make things right. High above the clouds or deep within the trenches of society, both women carried the lessons of Flight 723 with them, a shared legacy of justice, empathy, and the enduring fight for a fairer world. Months passed since the incident on Flight 723, and its impact continued to ripple through the lives of those involved. For Sarah, the flight attendant whose actions sparked a national conversation about racial profiling, every day was a reminder of the weight of her mistake and the responsibility she now carried to make things right. Her suspension had ended, but returning to work wasn't easy. The stares from passengers and colleagues, the whispered comments behind her back, and the lingering guilt that clung to her like a shadow made each shift feel like walking a tightrope. But Sarah refused to let shame define her. Instead, she channeled her energy into becoming a better version of herself, not just for her own redemption, but for the sake of others who might face similar prejudices in the future. She threw herself into diversity training programs, attending sessions not only required by her employer, but also seeking out additional workshops and seminars on her own time. Each lesson opened her eyes to the systemic biases embedded in society, reinforcing how deeply rooted these issues were and how much work still needed to be done. One of the most transformative moments came during a panel discussion hosted by the airline, where Maya Johnson was invited as a guest speaker. Though Sarah knew Maya would likely attend, she hadn't expected to meet her face-to-face again. When their paths crossed briefly after the event, Sarah hesitated, unsure if approaching her was appropriate. Finally, gathering her courage, she stepped forward. "Agent Johnson," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I just want to say, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. What I did was wrong, and I'll carry that with me forever." Maya studied her for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Sarah's surprise, she extended her hand. "Apology accepted," Maya said simply. "What matters now is what you do next. How you use this experience to create change." Those words stayed with Sarah long after the encounter ended. They weren't dismissive or forgiving in a way that absolved her completely. Instead, they challenged her to keep moving forward, to turn her regret into action. Inspired by Maya's grace and determination, Sarah decided to take her advocacy further. She started volunteering with organizations dedicated to combating racial bias, speaking at schools and community centers about her journey, from making a harmful assumption to learning the importance of empathy and understanding. Her story resonated with many, particularly young people who felt powerless against discrimination. Listening to Sarah speak openly about her mistakes gave them hope that even those who err can grow and contribute positively to societal change. Over time, Sarah began to see herself not as a villain in the narrative, but as someone who had stumbled and learned, a testament to the possibility of redemption when one commits to doing better. For Maya, the aftermath of the incident reinforced her commitment to using her platform to challenge stereotypes and advocate for justice. The viral attention brought opportunities to address larger audiences, including policymakers and corporate leaders, about the need for systemic reforms. Yet despite the accolades and admiration she received, Maya remained grounded in her mission. She understood that real progress required more than speeches. It demanded tangible actions and sustained efforts. One such effort was collaborating with airlines and transportation authorities to develop stricter guidelines around passenger privacy and interactions. Drawing from her experience on Flight 723, Maya helped design training modules that emphasized cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. These resources were rolled out across multiple carriers, reaching thousands of employees worldwide. Knowing that her intervention could prevent similar incidents gave Maya a sense of fulfillment beyond her covert operations. Still, Maya never lost sight of the personal toll such encounters took on individuals like herself. Being racially profiled wasn't new to her. It was a recurring theme in her life, both as a Black woman and as a professional navigating predominantly white spaces. But each instance reminded her why she chose this path: to fight not only for national security, but also for equality and fairness. As she prepared for another high-stakes assignment, Maya reflected on the interconnectedness of her roles, as an agent protecting her country, and as an advocate standing up for marginalized communities. Back in the public sphere, the legacy of Flight 723 continued to inspire broader conversations about bias and accountability. Passengers became more vocal about their rights, demanding transparency and respect from airlines. Social media campaigns gained traction, urging travelers to report discriminatory behavior and hold companies accountable. Advocacy groups seized the momentum, pushing for legislative changes to protect individuals from profiling in all forms of public service. Even within the airline industry, attitudes shifted noticeably. Employees began holding each other accountable, calling out inappropriate behavior rather than turning a blind eye. Managers implemented anonymous reporting systems, encouraging staff to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. While no system is perfect, the collective push for reform signaled progress, a glimmer of hope in an otherwise flawed world. As the months turned into a year, Sarah and Maya found themselves reflecting on the journey separately yet similarly. Both women recognized that the confrontation aboard Flight 723 had been a catalyst for growth, albeit in different ways. For Sarah, it was a painful but necessary awakening, one that forced her to confront her biases and strive for genuine understanding. For Maya, it was another chapter in her ongoing battle against prejudice, a reminder of the resilience required to challenge systemic injustices. Though their paths diverged after that fateful flight, their stories remained intertwined, a shared testament to the power of accountability, empathy, and perseverance. High above the clouds or deep within the trenches of society, both women carried the lessons of Flight 723 with them. That appearances can be deceiving, assumptions can harm, and true strength lies in confronting uncomfortable truths. In the end, what began as a tense confrontation aboard a transatlantic flight evolved into something far greater, a movement toward awareness, acceptance, and meaningful change. For Sarah, it was a humbling reminder of the consequences of unchecked bias. For Maya, it was another step in her lifelong mission to dismantle inequality. And for everyone touched by the incident, it served as a poignant lesson in humanity, a call to look beyond surface-level differences and embrace the shared values that bind us all together.